What's your top wow, that actually worked moment? Went to a dirt track race in the middle of Illinois. My friend went to buy his own tickets. I walked up the front gate and pulled out a Missouri Conservation Heritage card I bought for $2 to renew my turkey hunting tags. I walked up the front gate, drunk mind you, and said in a friendly but stern and confident voice, "Sir, this is my Missouri Conservation Heritage card." Gestured to the gate and followed up with, "I think this should be fine enough." He goes, "Missouri Conser what?" Even more stern, "Missouri Department of Conservation Heritage card. Sir, it says right here." He just goes, "Oh right. Department of Missouri, yes right away, go on through." I said thanks and walked in. I think the confidence I showed, as if my card meant anything, let alone in another state, was enough for him to go, "Who cares, I'll just let him in." I saved like $7, but it was a fun story when my buddy asked how I got in before him. I don't want to argue with a drunk. I was on a first date. Normally, I never go beyond making out on a first date, but that day I was feeling bold, so I decided to ask her if she wanted to come over and meet my roommate's dog. Yep, that worked. I tried that line on a few more girls and it also worked. Remember to carry a dog leash with you everywhere and tell girls it's for the rescue dog you have outside, thereby demonstrating value. I bought a house with a kitchen that hasn't been updated since the 60s. Mostly because I loved the light brown oven. Shortly after moving in, the oven stopped working correctly. We couldn't find anybody to repair it, so we found the elements at a scrapyard and replaced them. It still didn't work. We were about to have it replaced when I begged for one more chance. The oven had a clock on it and a time bake function, so you could set your oven to bake something at a specific time. The clock was broken when we bought the house. I decided to try cooking something on the time bake setting instead of regular bake. It turns out that the dial had been put back on at the wrong angle, so time bake equals regular bake. I've been using the oven for maybe 3 or 4 years now and it's not perfect, but it gets the job done. I half ran a stop sign that got ran a lot. Cop pulled me over. By half ran, I mean, I was doing a California slow roll through, and halfway through I saw the cop and stopped. He walks up, asked me if I knew I ran the stop sign. I said yes. Then, I don't know why, but I asked, "May I have your mercy?" He takes a step back, looked a little perplexed, runs my license, comes back, and just says, "Today, I am merciful. Stop running stop signs." Let off with a warning. I did a technically illegal pass on a back road. The dude was doing 30 in a 40, so I zipped around him real quick right as a cop came over the hill behind us and caught it. I got pulled over, of course. He asked me what the reason for the illegal pass was. Stupidity. He laughed for like 15 seconds, rang my license and insurance, then let me off with a warning and a lecture. I like him. Friend's dad a couple years ago has an old Windows 2000 computer with a dead hard drive. Normally this wouldn't be an issue as it's an old butt machine, just get a new one. But unfortunately this hard drive had the only backup copy of some very important family pictures since the external HDD they kept important file backups on died a few weeks prior. Went through every troubleshooting step I could think of in order to recover the data and nothing. As far as I could tell, drive was completely shot. So in one last desperate attempt I blew on the connectors and the ports like I was trying to get my NES cartridge to work, flicked the drive with my finger, and gave it a small dramatic speech about needing to stay alive for the family. Freaking thing booted, stayed on long enough for me to grab the files, and then went dead. Whoa. Okay, so, I'm 15 years old and I'm walking home from my friend's house. I've just bought a Nokia 8210 from him for £10 and swapped my SIM card over. In my other pocket is my old phone, super basic. All the numbers had rubber off and the screen was cracked to heck. I'm about 3 minutes from home down the same street, which goes over a hill and only has one side with a train track on the other. As I'm walking towards the crest of the hill I see my worst nightmare. Bigger boys. I think there were like 6 or 7, and as soon as I saw them see me I knew what was gonna go down. As we crossed paths the biggest one stopped me and asked for the time, whilst a few others circled around me. "I've not got a watch. What about your phone?" "Commissar, look mate, you don't wanna rob this phone." I whip out my piece of crap brick. I could probably use an effective weapon if I really need to. It's a piece of crap, There's no numbers on the buttons. I've lost the antenna. You can barely read the screen. He then grabs the phone, looks at it, then me and then passes me back saying yeah that's a piece of crap. Go on. Frick off. I felt like the most genius badass ever as I quickly walked home to call my friend. TLDR. Avoided getting mugged, probably beaten up and losing my new phone by presenting and crap talking my old phone. My terrible sleep pattern is linked to my mental health. A few months ago I told myself I have to be in bed by 10 and not to touch my phone. I could stay awake and fantasize or stare at the ceiling as long as I wanted but I had to be in bed. And it worked. I've been slipping the past few weeks but it did wonders for my mental health. Even went from not leaving my room to getting a part-time volunteer position and I'm doing good at it. That's fantastic. The brakes on my crappy SUV went completely out one day, so instead of paying for a tow truck my dad decided to connect my car to his pickup truck with a big chain. My car in front, dad in back, and have me drive to the mechanic shop. My car could still accelerate just fine, just no brakes whatsoever, so we called each other on our cell phones and every time I needed to slow down or stop I'd just tell him and he'd hit the brakes on the pickup which would either slow my car or yank it stopped if he did it too abruptly. It was completely stupid, illegal, and definitely dangerous but we got there just fine and didn't have to drop $100 on a tow truck so it worked. Did this with my dad in a car I broke the axle or something IDK. Car would turn left but not right. He was in front pulling and I was in the back. It was a harrowing 20-minute drive on city streets but we made it only to find it would cost more to fix the car than it was worth so we scrapped it for $200 which my dad kept. Technically his car. The first time I hit on a girl, we ended up sleeping together that night and the whole time I was thinking, wow, that actually worked. I'm a straight dude with a lot of gay friends. One of them jokingly refers to me as king of the gays. I was visiting some friends in another city a few weeks ago and we try to go into a gay bar, but the doorman tells me there's a cover charge. I, being drunk, blurted out but I am king of the gays and he laughed and let me in. Friend brought me his Acer netbook around 2008. Remember those crappy things? The machine wouldn't boot up and seemed pretty dead. Looked around forums and found a few mention of soldering from the power connector going bad. Solution was to fit the netbook in a precise spot. I tried a few smell hit but no success. Reading down on post someone mentioned that you actually had to hit it fairly hard. That most people just didn't want to risk it hard enough. I thought okay, nothing to lose anyway and punched the netbook pretty hard with my fist and plugged it back in. Dang thing booted fine and actually worked normally after that until my friend forgot about it or threw it away. Can't remember. Only IT case I ever saw where the real fix was actually percussive maintenance. I was a supervisor for a company. I was really good at it. Like the king of it good. I hated my boss because he was unprofessional and would yell at people on the floor rather than take them aside away from other employees. I put up with it for 2 years because I refused to leave unless I had another job with equivalent pay and benefits lined up. I was a new father and had a family to look out for. I found an acceptable job but not my ideal line of work. I wanted them to do something about it but was very skeptical. I was willing to take the risk. So I put in my 2 weeks and left for the new job hoping like heck they wouldn't just let me leave. They offered more pay to stay but I refused because I didn't want to work under my current boss as he was too toxic. I didn't want to leave this company because I loved it, just not my boss. Within 2 weeks the CEO emailed me telling me that the guy I hated was no longer employed there, then asked if I would have lunch with him. They didn't just want me back as a supervisor. I ended up being a district manager, a position never before seen in this company. I've been happily running multiple branches for 6 years now. A baby deer got trapped in our backyard and was throwing itself into the chain link fence. Couldn't think to look behind and see the open gate. I remembered reading Cicero's Proarchia, where he mentions that sometimes animals react to music. So I told my wife to grab my guitar and play a few chords. Sure enough, the deer calmed down and started walking towards the music. She stopped for a second and it instantly freaked out again and started running into the fence. But as soon as she started again it calmed down and walked towards the sound. Once it got about halfway, it saw the gate and ran out. Wife thinks I'm a goddamn wizard now. Once when I was a kid we picked up McDonald's for lunch on the way home from somewhere. I got settled in at the table and realized that I forgot to grab ketchup. I didn't want to stand up again. So I turned to my younger sister and said, I wish we weren't out of ketchup. To which she replies, no we aren't. We go back and forth a few times with me vehemently denying we had ketchup, until she angrily stomped to the fridge, grabbed it, and slammed it down right in front of me. She still gets mad when I bring it up to this day. LOL. You'd be insanely surprised how many places you can go without permission paying etc. just by acting like you belong with some confidence. A guy at work was at a baseball game waiting around to get a player's autograph. Somehow he ended up getting ushered in with the press, so he just played along and asked some questions to the players. Convinced I would bomb my RE final exam, I went out drinking the night before. I show up hungover, circle some answers and left after 30 minutes. I got the second highest grade in the class. In college, I took a literature review course that included Dante's Divine Comedy. I had read it at 16, because it was mentioned in SE7N. I was an edgelord dipshit, not a literature connoisseur. Inferno is great and Purgatorio is more interesting than I'd thought, but Paradiso is boring as heck. 21-year-old me declined to reread any of them prior to the essay test for this class. I just decided to balls my way through based on what I remembered from years before. Got an A. I tapped out halfway through Paradise. It's like an endless list of and then I met this really cool person. I bet you're jealous, wink wink. My buddy was having a bad weekend, and we were next day buzzed at our college's cafeteria. We load up on tater tots and pizza, and other state school level brunch items. He's bumming so I say, hey man, see her over there? Cute right? Sure. Okay well I'm going to go hit on her. Be back in a sec. I have no game with women. I am nothing to look at. I smelled like Jagger and Marlboro Lights. I think I was wearing sweatpants and a button-up shirt. For some freaking reason. I'm not convinced I had ever hit on anyone before. It isn't me. The entire premise was she would throw her drink in my face, or be horrified, and I would walk away laughing, and my buddy would get a laugh out of my hilarious public rejection. Anyway, when I got there I didn't know what to do, so we just talked. I sorta knew the girl she was with. I sort of addressed her, then flirted with her cute blonde friend. Nothing happened. I walked back to my table. Anyway, cute blonde friend and I had a class that semester, and with the ice broken I just talked to her like a non-retarded person. We have been married a decade now and have 2 kids. It was 1000% supposed to be a joke, so it didn't work, but, I mean, it sort of worked. The long game. I was a photographer in the army, and I had tickets to see this music festival called Virgin Fest. I showed up with my work camera, Canon 5D MKI, and went straight to media. I acted confused as to why my name wasn't on the list, and answered every question they had with I don't know. I was just told to be here and shoot. This should have all been taken care of already. I then pretended to make some phone calls off to the side. 10 minutes later, this lady pulls up with a golf cart and hands me a media sticker and wristband. That was the day I shot my first concert, which included Weezer, Blink 182, Taking Back Sunday and Public Enemy. I used that day to make friends with other photographers shooting and used those contacts to end up shooting hundreds of concerts and festivals and nearly all of my favorite bands. TLDR. Apparently the normal fix for computers fixes cars as well. My friend and I were going to the mall in her car. She started the car and everything seemed fine. She put it in reverse, but all it seemed to do was put the car in neutral. No amount of pushing on the gas made the car move. The only reason we were moving back at all was because of the incline of the driveway. Once we've rolled back on flat ground, she puts it in drive hoping that it'll fix itself, but nope. We're not moving at all. In a moment of what is either brilliance or sheer stupidity, I said, "Why don't you turn it off and turn it back on? Like it was a computer." Sure enough, she turned it off and turned it back on and everything was fine. It was like nothing was ever broken. So we drove to the mall and nothing like that ever happened to her car again. I've done this. Sometimes the key isn't turned all the way and the car looks like it's on and running and you can switch gears but not move. So just turn it off and then start the engine correctly. Recently, my fiancée and I bought a house. We close on Thursday, actually. We are currently living in an apartment, and we'll be breaking the lease, so we'd be on the hook for 2 months rent. Or we would be if I didn't get us out free and clear. I have had issues with this apartment complex's management company, and so did a lot of other people apparently, because they have switched management companies 3 times in the 7 months we've been there, and this is a building that is literally brand new this year. So I wrote an email to the new property manager explaining the issues we've had since living there. Noisy neighbors, weird smells, furnace not working and taking way longer than it should have to fix it, being out of wipes in the gym, people not picking up after their dogs, etc. Nothing technically against their side of the lease, but just crappy things overall. It's close to a college campus. We thought it would be far enough away and too costly for students to live there, but we were wrong. So all of our neighbors are college age kids, and they don't respect anything. Not their neighbors or their property, and not their own property either. Like a bunch of drunk toddlers running around breaking stuff and not taking responsibility. Anyway, I told the new property manager that because he was new it wouldn't exactly be fair to him if my fiancé and I told the general public about our negative experience there. So that if we could just get out of our lease and end this whole thing amicably, then we wouldn't write any reviews or anything. And it worked. I was expecting to fight them tooth and nail in a small claims court, and still probably lose. But I guess the dude figured it would be cheaper to let us out of our lease than the potential loss of income from bad reviews. So yeah, I was able to save us a couple grand. Which is great, because I'm sure we'll need it for our new home. The first time I turned on my computer. It was my first time building a computer and I was worried. My friends assured me that it was simple, but I barely knew what I was doing. So much euphoria when it turned on without a hitch. I've built more than my fair share of computers. The one that always gets me is the power supply switch, which has led to many moments of dread when the power button does nothing. Out of the blue, with no flirting whatsoever, told my crush I had a crush on her. I also suggested we maybe date if A wants to. Worked perfectly, 11 months together and counting. I managed to get a relatively cheap, for the area, apartment by an old job of mine. Most of the people living there had money, so I'm sure I was bringing down the average. There was a summer show they were doing, however tickets cost a few hundred a pop. I certainly couldn't afford it. Besides, I was working through most of it, as it was supposed to end at 6 PM and I was scheduled to work until 5. It was pushing 8 PM and I could still hear a ton of noise from where the summer show happening. I was less than a 20-minute walk. It was nice out. I had time to kill. Why not swing by? As I got closer it was clear that it was still in full swing. And apparently the big final act, Santana, was ridiculously late, so the show was going late to accommodate. I could hear from chatter as people were leaving that some thought it was because he was bringing someone else fancy with him. I dunno. I got to the front and just said the first thing I thought of, my imaginary sibling left her chair earlier. Is there a lost and found I can try? I can come back tomorrow if it's easier to wait on cleanup crew to put things aside. She waved me through, and that's how I got to see Santana for free. I had a cat that got sick a few times in a row, unrelated stuff, and after 2 visits to the veterinarian, she started freaking out, throwing tantrums whenever she saw her carrier. It was impossible to get her into the thing. So we came up with the idea of baiting her into the carrier by putting a little slice of sausage inside the carrier where she couldn't reach without getting in. We thought she wouldn't buy it, but girls gotta eat, I suppose. I wish this worked with my cat. He's a 20-pound ball of fat and muscle who will only get in his carrier on his terms. He has to go to the vet every 6 months to get blood work for his diabetes, and we basically have to throw a blanket on him, wrap him up in it, and stuff him in the carrier. He's wise to me tricking him in there with food or treats. Pre-journalism student who desperately needed a passing grade in both math and stats class to advance. Found a class at a nearby community college that would fulfill both requirements in a once-a-week, 3-hour course. Still struggled at times, but it wasn't the worst. Until my car died. Ended up getting backed up in class and missed a couple tests. Talked to the teacher and he said I could take them home before the final. Did the best I could, and on the final, which I barely completed, straight up wrote a short essay apologizing and asking for the lowest possible passable grade, just high enough to transfer to my university to get into the J school. 2 weeks later I got my grade, C+, way higher than what I needed. When I was 16/17 I was home by myself while my parents were on holiday and got a little overconfident in my cooking skills. Started a chip pan oil fire, frantically running around the kitchen and vaguely remembered hearing about throwing a tea towel over the flames to put it out. Did it as a last gasp effort and it actually worked, but I was all ready to grab my cat and abandon the house if it hadn't. I'm a new father. My son is coming up on 8 weeks old. One day about a month ago, he was crying inconsolably, just screaming bloody murder. So I go down the new baby checklist of needs. Just ate, check. Cloths are dry, check. Diaper is clean, check. Doesn't feel warm, check. Doesn't feel cold, check. The checklist came back fine. Why is he screaming like an invisible monster is eating him? I put my hands on his shoulders as he lay there screaming and in my best authoritative tone said, "Hey." He stopped crying and just looked at me. We both just stared for a moment. He started crying again almost immediately, but for those few moments, peace. My buddy's $1,200 fridge just stopped working. Peeked around and found a control board. Found a blown fuse soldered to the board. Bought a fuse holder and fuse from Radio Shack. I miss you. For $4. Replaced it and the fridge worked perfectly again. Also modding my PS1 with a chip so that I could play copied games. That was awesome. Got my transfer application rejected from a somewhat prestigious university in my area, so I wrote an appeals on references and got accepted. Really wasn't expecting that to happen. Our cat hid one of her newborn kittens in, well, let's call it a barn. The temperature was still low at night, so when we found it, it was almost frozen and on the brink of death. I took it on me, tucked it away into my hoodie and slept there for a few hours. I couldn't believe it, but it worked and the kitten survived. While helping my best friend clean out his basement, we happened upon his old bop it. The thing was busted because the sounds all played out super slow and demonic. As a joke I chuck it at his concrete basement wall while saying to him, "Hey, you think this will fix it?" It slams into the wall, then falls to the floor, landing on the large button and letting out a crystal clear bop it. It was in art class back in high school. It takes me a long time to do art. I don't know why. I'm pretty decent at drawing something I'm looking at because I just draw every line I can see in the same shape and direction without skipping anything and it surprisingly works out. But I'm terrible at creating something out of nothing. Anyways, everyone else was about 2 or 3 projects ahead of me. And the next project I had to do was a dang coil pot with all these thin long rings of clay you have to spend forever making and stack on each other. The pots had to reach a minimum height which usually took 15-20 coils. Time consuming and I was already behind. So I said frick it. I quickly rolled up 5 giant rings that reached the minimum height and started on the next project. The teacher came over, saw my coil pot, and called the entire class to stop what they were doing and come to my table. I thought I was about to get chewed out by him in front of everyone, but it turns out he was just amazed by my pot and had never seen anything like it and thought it was the coolest thing ever. I got full points for it and it was definitely the highest grade I ever got in that class. He even kept it to put in his display case in the hall. The project I put the least effort and time in. Art is stupid. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.